Today we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, and the topic is how to start a multi-million dollars consulting business. That's right. Not only just how to start a consulting business, but how to start a multi-million dollars very successful consulting business. Hello, my name is Nitin Pradhan, and I'm the co-founder of ScaleUP USA. ScaleUP USA is a digital business and career growth accelerator operating out of Washington, D.C. You should check out our URL, scaleupusa.xyz. One more thing that I would suggest before we get this started, do go out and subscribe to our ScaleUP USA channel on YouTube, because there are many videos there which can be helpful for your career and business growth, and many more are coming. So with that, let me get started with this very interesting topic, how to start a multi-million dollars consulting business. So actually in that particular statement, there are really four different questions that we need to answer. First, how do you start a consulting business? Because you obviously have to have a consulting business to make a lot of money here. So first you need to figure out how you start a consulting business. The second thing is, it just doesn't help finding and starting a consulting business. You have to have folks who are going to buy your consulting service. So the second question is, how do you find motivated buyers that are actually going to go and buy your consulting service? So that's the question we're going to tackle. The third thing we're going to do is to actually help you understand how you make much more money than most other consultants. Because yes, there are consultants who make some money, some others make more money, and some others make even more money. So what's the secret for making even more money? How do you get lots of money? That's what we are going to discuss. And then finally, obviously, if you're going to do all of these things, you're going to need some training and education. You can't just get out and actually get successful. You need some resources for this training. And I'm going to point you in the direction of some resources that are going to help you actually become successful. So let's get started. Now, if you want to make money in life, really there are three major choices. The first choice is you could be gainfully employed. You could work for someone. Now, here's what I will tell you. As time is going by, the number of employment-related jobs are actually falling, because most of these people are now hiring people as consultants, especially the top-tier jobs. And so if you want to try and make money by getting employed, your chances of making a lot of money is actually not very high, unless you join and become part of some leadership team. So yes, you can do and get money by being employed, but again, that's probably not the best way that you'll make a lot of money. And typically, the chances that you become a multimillionaire just by being employed somewhere is typically low. So the second choice is you can actually become a consultant. When you become a consultant, what you're doing actually is you are providing expert knowledge to a third party for a fee. And so what that means is you actually have some expert knowledge. There actually is a third party which needs this knowledge, and they're willing to pay for it. And so that's what a consultant is. And we're going to talk a lot more how to do that, but that's your second choice. Now, the important point about being a consultant, it's like almost being employed but making much more money, having much more flexibility, and actually being your own boss. So that's why consulting becomes that much more interesting. And the third choice, of course, is that you can actually build and sell a product. So you become a product-based company. Now, there's a lot of money to be made in this third choice too, but the problem here is that creating a product, actually manufacturing it, and then distributing it and selling it is very complicated. That is why consulting seems to be the easy way out. And that is why we are focusing on how to become a consultant and make money in this particular video. So again, if you have not subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe, because there's a lot more information coming here. Now, the typical model for a consultant is very simple. The consultant has some expert knowledge, and that knowledge can be very valuable for the potential client. So the consultant gives this knowledge to the client has the money, and the client actually pays the consultant via fees. So the consultant is providing value, the client in return is providing fees. That's how this is happening. Now, you probably know this, but let me dive in a little bit more in depth so that you can understand what you need to do to become a successful consultant. So the first thing you need to have is, if you're going to go out and do consulting, you need to have a consultant's pitch. And that pitch needs to be very, very good if you want to make a lot of money. And so you need to plan the pitch, you need to prepare the pitch, you need to practice the pitch, and you need to execute the pitch. And pitch is nothing but a story that you're going to tell your client, so the client gets impressed with your knowledge and expertise and begins to trust you, and they go out and give you big orders. That's a pitch. Now, I can tell you, you will have to develop and go through this process multiple times. You'll have to spend some time to plan the pitch and prepare it and practice it and execute it. And when you execute it the first 10, 20, 50, 100 times, it may not be that successful because you are learning. You will learn and improve. And somewhere there will come a time that your consulting pitch is so good that when you actually give it, the client is going to be very impressed. And even if they don't have money, they're going to try and find the money and actually get you on as a consultant. And at that stage, you have arrived. And at that stage, you'll make a lot of money. So start planning your consultant's pitch as soon as possible, because that is going to be a very interesting way for you to make a lot of money. Now, of course, if you're employed today, you can still start practicing your consulting pitch while you're employed, right? There's nothing telling you to leave your job and start a consulting pitch. In fact, if you're employed, you should start this almost as a side business. Start understanding a particular topic, get specialized, plan your pitch, prepare the pitch, practice the pitch, and actually execute the pitch. And you might do part of these consulting pitches and activities as a part-time consultant before you get the confidence, the contact, the network to actually go out and do that. And I recommend that to people, to actually start part-time and then get full-time once you sort of get the hold of the things. But the important thing is for you to start, is for you to make that effort. Now, I want to talk something about this consultant's pitch. If you want your consultant's pitch to really stick, and if you want your consultant's pitch to actually be a valuable package for the client, you really need 5 different things in that pitch. The first thing you need is you need a narrow focused area where you're going to do consulting. You cannot pick a very broad area, and I'm going to come to that a little later when I go through these 5 topics. So first thing, you need to have a narrow focused area where you're going to go out and do consulting. The second thing is you need to have expertise and qualifications in that narrow focused area. You can't have expertise somewhere else. You need to have expertise in the narrow focused area. The third thing you need to have is potentially have some educational qualifications, potentially have some certifications. So again, that boosts your credibility to the client. The fourth thing you need to have is some experience and training. You can't just read a book and become a consultant. That becomes very difficult. You need to be able to show that you have some experience, some training, you have done this kind of work. That again helps. And then finally, you need to have some testimonials and some case studies so that you can actually show that when you did consulting, a lot of good happened and people actually went and talked positively about it. So these are the 5 things that you're going to need. And I will tell you, if you start off as a consultant, it's very difficult to just go out and get somebody to pay you while you go through this 5-step and gather testimonials and case studies. So essentially, initially, you may even have to do the initial consulting free or at a very reduced cost so that you build up your consulting practice. But remember, you need to do it only a couple of times and get your testimonials there and get all your procedures and processes in the right shape. And very quickly, you can become a very highly paid consultant. And again, you can start doing this all part-time, and you can get a lot of this expertise and experience and education and certifications while you're working for somebody. You could be working for a particular area, decide to do consulting in that area, and actually get all of this experience and then go out and become a consultant. That's entirely likely. So now let me go back to a specific narrow focused area that's very important. So I have been a buyer of technology. I have worked in very senior positions. I bought a lot of technology. About 10 to 15 billion dollars worth of technology is what me and my offices bought when I was leading those offices. And as a result, I bought a lot of consulting, practices, and I brought a lot of consulting from some of these consultants. And I want to walk you through what a great consultant does and what an ordinary consultant does. So an ordinary consultant might come to the buyer and say, hey, I do consulting. What would you like to buy? And they want really the buyer to tell the consultant what they are going to like. They're very general. And this being general in consulting generally does not work, because the chances that you are an expert in almost anything is virtually impossible. And the buyer sees through that. So never go out and become a generalist consultant. You're not going to get a lot of jobs. You're not going to get a lot of consulting. You're not going to make a lot of money. So the next choice is you can become more focused. So let's say you say, I'm not just doing consulting, I do strategy consulting. So that's a little bit more focused than consulting in general, and that might work out better than consulting. But if you really want to be an expert, you might want to just not do strategy consulting. You might want to do, for example, strategy consulting for energy industry. Now that is much more focused than strategy consulting in general. And if you really want to be a star, you might get even more focused. So you might say, hey, I want to do strategy consulting for solar industry. As you know, solar industry is part of the energy industry, so it's very, very focused. Now, if you decide to do strategy consulting for solar industry, you have a narrow focus topic. You can now go out and get expertise and qualifications and education and certification. And you can even do that while you're working. You can decide to work for some solar manufacturer, learn everything about that industry, and then start your strategy consulting in solar industry as a result of this experience and training. And if you've got all this experience and training, obviously you would have worked with some people. You could also get some testimonials. You also could make some case studies. That's how you grow your consulting practice. That's what you need to do. Now, I'm going to tell you something which is very important. You can be a consultant and make good money, or you can be a consultant and make a lot of money. And the difference between making good money and a lot of money is really two words: productized consulting. So what do I mean by productized consulting? Productized consulting is consulting sold as a product. So let me explain. So let's say, you are a lawyer, and you're two types of lawyers. You're either a generalist lawyer or you're a specialty lawyer. Let's say you're a generalist lawyer. So you do general law practice, okay? And, some client comes to you and the client wants a joint venture agreement developed. Now you're a generalist lawyer. You understand how to develop a joint venture agreement. So you tell the client, you discuss everything with the client, get down all the notes, and you spend the next 15 days drafting the joint venture agreement. And you draft it and give it to the client, and you charge the client $25,000. So now in this case, you're a generalist lawyer. You spent 15 days drafting the joint venture agreement, and you got $25,000 from the client. Now let's say that you're not a generalist lawyer, you're a specialty law firm. And the specialty of your law firm is really joint ventures and joint venture agreements. So obviously you have done this many times. You have a number of templates that you can use for this client that has come in. So maybe you have an 80-page template which is very detailed, very nice, very well done. You just dust off that from your shelf and you're going to customize that for this client. So in this case, instead of taking 15 days, you might just take 1 day. And because you are a specialty law firm with a lot of knowledge in joint venture consulting and joint venture agreements, you're going to charge a little bit more. So you're not going to charge $25,000, maybe you're going to charge $35,000. So this is how you're going to make much more money. The generalist lawyer made $25,000 working 15 days, whereas you, the specialty law firm, worked only 1 day and made $35,000. Obviously, you're going to be much richer than the generalist law firm. And the reason that's happening is because the specialist law firm has actually productized the consulting. They know exactly a focused area where they're going to go out and do consulting. They've already pre-prepared, all the consulting reports and, comments and graphs and data and everything already exists. And all they need to do is to actually customize it for their client rather than build the whole damn thing. Okay. So that's called productized consulting. And you should go out and do this. Now let me go to the most important part of consulting. Yes, you picked a really good topic. Yes, you are an expert. You can pitch well. Everything is done well. You still need to do the most important part of consulting if you want to make money. You must be able to find a motivated buyer. If you can't find a motivated buyer, everything else is not going to work out. And what do I mean by a motivated buyer? A motivated buyer really has 5 qualities to them. The first is they have the need. They have the need for the kind of consulting that you're going to offer. The second is they have the money. They have the money to buy the consulting at the rate that you desire. Third, they have the desire to work with you, right? So they just can't have money and need. They need to have the desire to work with you. So they have that. 4, they are in a hurry to buy your consulting. Because if they are not in a hurry, you might be wasting their 1 year, 2 years just trying to convince them. So you have to have a client who is actually in a hurry to buy your consulting. And finally, 5, they need to trust you. Because if they don't trust you, all of the other 4 things are okay, but they will probably not give you an order. So those are the 5 things that need to come out. And these 5 things were actually, listed by a guy named Ziegler. And he was a salesperson and he was a pretty famous personality. So I'm really taking this Ziegler's buyer obstacles, the 5 topics that they fit in perfectly for consulting. So if you are going to go out and do consulting, you must find a motivated buyer. And when you find somebody that you want to sell, you want to just in your mind run through these 5 things. Do they have the need? Do they have the money? Do they have the desire? Do they have the hurry to buy your product, and do they trust you? And if you can find somebody like that, that's going to be great. Now, I know from talking to people that one of the most important issues that consultants face is how the hell to find this motivated buyer. It's not easy. Especially, for example, in our case, let's say you're done, this solar consulting and you're going to do strategy consulting around solar. You need to first go out and find who is doing solar, who has interest in it, and then you need to find a whole bunch of things that we said and find this buyer. And that is not easy. That is not easy. And what happens because of that is that consultants start trying to sell to losers. And when I say losers, losers are folks who do not either have the money, the desire, the interest, all those 5 things. They don't have one or more of them. And once you start selling to a loser, you're just wasting your time, because you'll spend time and reduce your price and ultimately do it for free, but you may not get that order. So the important part here is, how do you find a motivated buyer? And how do you not sell to a loser? And I am going to tell you the trick that's going to change your life here. So pay special attention. I am going to identify a buyer that is going to buy almost any consulting service that you might decide to have, because this buyer is so large and buys so many things and buys across the nation that whatever you are selling, the chances are that this buyer is willing to buy it. So let me try and explain who this buyer is. Yes, the buyer that I'm talking about is selling to the US federal government. The US federal government is the world's largest buyer. The US federal government is the world's largest marketplace. They buy all across the US, and they buy actually even internationally. Okay. So if you're actually in US or even internationally, the chances are that the US federal government is buying stuff. They buy everything. They'll buy a kitchen sink. They'll buy a car. They'll buy a truck. They'll buy a tank. They'll buy a solar windmill. They'll actually have consulting in solar and energy and oil and whatever you want. They probably are doing it, because they are buying roughly $1.4 trillion worth of stuff That could be products and services, okay? So the important part is if you actually want to start selling and you want to become a great consultant, this is a great place to actually go out and start selling your consulting practice. Now, here's the thing. It is important for you to know that you need to understand how the federal government actually works, how they buy, and how you can sell to the federal government. Because once you understand how you do that, it's applicable pretty much throughout the United States federal government. It doesn't matter whether you're working with Department of Transportation or whether you're working with Pentagon or whether you're working with Homeland Security or Health and Human Services. Typically, the processes that the US federal government has are pretty much standard. And here's the issue. Because people perceive that working with the US federal government as complicated, as bureaucratic, many people don't try it. I'll give you an example. There are roughly about 32 million businesses in US, and I would say less than 500,000 of them are actually even trying to work with the government, okay? That's like less than 1% of the businesses are even trying to work with the US federal government. And I would say roughly about 50,000 businesses are all that are actually actively working with the federal government. Remember, there are 32 million businesses in US, and we estimate that less than 50,000 are actually actively trying to work with the US federal government. That's a very small number, and the marketplace is huge, over $1 trillion annually. And so what I want you to do is I want you to focus on this one buyer, because if you're in any part of the US, you will see that the US federal government is probably buying right in your locality. They have the money, they have the desire, they actually will trust you because of various things, and they'll sort of make you prove certain things, but you can do that. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually give you two short demonstrations that you should absolutely look at and actually start planning your strategy. The first demonstration is I'm going to talk about generally and show you how much the US federal government is buying across the US. So that's one thing, so that you can actually see for yourself how much the US government is spending right in your locality. I'm going to show you that. So you don't need to just take my word for it. You can actually go out and see it for yourself. That's the first thing. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you how you can get trained to actually work with the US federal government. This is very important. And I started doing this because I saw such a big opportunity. And so what we have done is ScaleUP USA has actually created a federal business accelerator program. And I'm going to suggest that you join that program. Because if you join that program, you're going to understand what the US federal government is, how do you work with the US federal government, how do you win contracts and grants with the US federal government. And if you can do that, it's going to change your life. It's going to change actually the life of your family and even the locality that you live in. So we are going to do these two things, and these are two separate demos that I'm going to do. So what I suggest is you actually look at these demos and then actually register for the right program and actually start taking it. Because if you want to be successful, you want to become a successful consultant, you can't just think your way through. You actually go out and act. And I've given you the roadmap here. I've given you the resources here. The resources are really affordable. And so there's no reason why you can't do this. So let me show you the first demonstration that I mentioned. And I have here on the screen a site called usaspending.gov. And this is a site that's created by the US federal government. And as the site says, it sort of talks about where the US federal government is spending money and how much it is and on what kind of activities. So it's a great site for you. I'm not going to get into all the details of this site. There are lots and lots of details here. What I want to convince you here is that the US federal government spends a lot of money, and it pretty much spends a lot of money everywhere in US. That's what I want to talk about. So as I have it here, I'm talking about what the US federal government has spent in 2018. That's the fiscal year 2018. And the reason I've taken 2018 is because that's the last fiscal year for which the data was available for the entire year, that I can actually show when I recorded this particular video. So that's why we have 2018 listed here. And then we are going to talk about 3 different types of expenditure that the federal government has done in this particular demo year. We're going to talk about contracts and we're going to talk about grants. And the reason we're going to talk about contracts and grants is because this is typically what a consultant could go after. That is why we're going to talk about this. So now that we have this clear, I have this map here, and this map is talking about the expenditure that the US federal government has done in either contracts or grants in each of the states. And this expenditure is by place of performance. That means this work was done in that particular state. So if you see here, California leads. The federal government did about $159 billion in California, very, very large. You also see that Texas is up there. The federal government spent about $98 billion in Texas. There's some other interesting states. There's Virginia, where I live, which is about $70 billion. That's what the US federal government spent there. Then there's New York, where the federal government spent about $79 billion. Now, folks, $79 billion is a lot of money. Now, you might say, yes, these are a large amount of spending, but these are large states. What about some of the smaller states? So let's look at some of the smaller states. And let's look at North Dakota. Even in a small state, a very sparsely populated state like North Dakota, the US federal government spent $2.5 billion. Even in South Dakota, it spent $2.6 billion. Let's look at Florida. Florida, it spent $52 billion. Let's look at Wyoming. It spent $1.8 billion. Let's look at Idaho. It spent $5.4 billion. Let's look at Montana. It spent $3.9 billion. Let's look at Arizona. It spent $32 billion. Let's look at Oklahoma. It spent $11.4 billion. The point that I'm making here is, if you live in any part of the US, the number one spender in that particular locality is going to be the US federal government. And they're going to put out a lot of contracts and they're going to put out a lot of grants. And if you have the expertise, and I told you how to create the expertise, and you have the focus area, and I showed you how to create the focus area, and then if you can figure out how to work with the federal government, you are going to get lots and lots of contracts, and you're going to make lots and lots of money. So now that I have proved to you that the federal government spends a lot of money right in your backyard, where you can go out and actually win consulting contracts. You can not only win it in your state, you could win it in neighboring state, or if you're very ambitious, you could actually go out and travel and get business all across the US. You could do all of that. Now that you know that this can be done, the bigger question is, how do you effectively sell to the federal government? How do you win contracts and grants from the federal government? That's a complex task. That's not easy. And that is why most of the consultants, most of the companies do not actually go and try to work with the federal government. But we have made it simple. And I am going to tackle that in the next demo so that you understand how you can do this step by step. So let's look at the next demo. Okay, folks, so now we are at the most important part of our program. And this is the part where I'm going to show you how the hell can you win business from the world's largest buyer, the US federal government. It's the largest marketplace. They are buying over $1 trillion worth of stuff via grants and contracts. And so if you can understand how to work with them, win business from them, then you are in big business. You're going to make a lot of money. And that's what we're going to discuss here. So the way you do this is you first need to go to our site, ScaleUPUSA.xyz. And if you're not sure of the URL, just go to any of our earlier presentation slides and you will see the URL there. So go to ScaleUPUSA.xyz. And once you go there, this is the kind of page you're going to see. ScaleUp USA is a digital business growth accelerator. We are actually based out of the Washington, D.C. metro area. That's where the US federal government is based. And our focus, our specialty is really to help businesses to actually get into the federal government. Remember, I talked about specialty. We have a very special focus. That's what we do. We help companies get into the federal marketplace. And we do it via our program called the Federal Business Acceleration Program. And if you want to access that program, you go on the top here and there's Federal Accelerator, you click on it. And you will come to the Federal Business Accelerator, and this is what we call the bundle. And the reason we call it the bundle, because as part of this Federal Business Accelerator, there are lots of smaller programs all put together. And when you buy the Federal Business Accelerator bundle, you get all the underlying programs in that particular bundle. Okay. And here's the kicker. If we add more programs as we do as part of this bundle, even if you have subscribed earlier, you will get access to all the new programs that are getting added in the Federal Business Accelerator bundle. So the Federal Business Accelerator program is growing, the bundle is growing. You can join now, and as more and more programs get added, you will get access to it as long as those programs are added to the Federal Business Accelerator bundle. Now, this program is specifically for contractors, consultants, entrepreneurs, startups, and small and mid-sized businesses interested in going in the $1 trillion US federal marketplace. And we have done this in a very unique way. We have created this as a Federal Business Accelerator. Now, typically, accelerators take some portion of your company as equity. We don't. Ours is strictly a subscription model. You pay $5.99 and you get access to this entire program bundle, and you get access for it for 1 year. So it's not that you just do it one day and you forget. You have access for it for 1 year, so you can actually learn, try out something. If you don't get something, go back and learn, and you gradually improve yourself. Now, we believe this is the most comprehensive Federal Business Acceleration program anywhere on the face of the earth. And we are actually adding more and more content on this. So this is really a cost-effective way to do this. We have already talked about how you create your startup in terms of consulting. We have told you how you create your pitch. We have told you how to narrow your pitch. We have told you everything. But ultimately, somebody needs to buy your product. Your product buying or your consulting buying is probably best going to happen through the US federal government. And this is the program that's going to allow you to do this. So again, it's $5.99 per year. It's a subscription model, so it will renew itself. Now, you can stop it anytime you want. That's your choice. No questions asked. And so the Federal Business Accelerator bundle currently has these programs in it. We have the base Federal Business Accelerator foundational program. That's something which you should start with. We have the corporate sales and government sales acceleration program. It talks about how do you sell to the federal government. So that's a very detailed program. In most cases, the federal government will ask for a proposal. This is the particular program that talks about how do you write winning proposals. If you want to do federal business development, this program talks about how do you do federal business development. Nowadays, the federal government is big time into artificial intelligence. So we have, a program on it. And keep on checking here because more and more programs are going to get added here. We are really building this out. There's a lot of interest in this program. So that's what you need to go out and do. And then there's a lot of information about, what the accelerator's goals are, why you should join it, why sell to the government. I've sort of gone through some of these kind of activities, but this is the program that I would absolutely suggest that you join. Now, one of the questions that we get many times is this is a great program for US companies, US citizens. What if you are an international citizen? You're not a US citizen. Is this program going to be of use? And our answer is yes. And I'm going to give you two reasons. One is because the US federal government actually buys a lot of consulting and other kinds of products and services globally. So if you know how to do business with the US federal government, you can start looking at opportunities that are coming in your country and you could still go for it. That's one choice. Second choice is if you are a US government ally, that's the US ally, you could potentially set up a company here. There's a lot of process involved in you setting as a foreign entity here and doing business with the government, but it can be done. A number of UK companies, Japanese companies, Korean companies have done that. You could potentially also try that. That's a little bit more complicated. You could do that. And then the final thing that I will tell you is that even if you are an international citizen, not a US citizen, you learn these processes that we have mentioned. Now remember, the US federal government is very sophisticated in how it buys, contracts and grants and all those kind of You learn how to work with the US federal government. You will have the expertise to actually go to your own national government, whether it be in China, India, or any part of the world. And you could actually win business from that particular government. So this could be a model not only for you to work with the US federal government, but it also would be a model for you to work with other national governments. That is why this program is not only great for US citizens, US companies, but it's also great for international citizens and international companies. So with that, I'm going to actually conclude this program. What I will suggest is at the end of it, make sure that you register into this program. Make sure you subscribe for the YouTube channel, because we are going to put a lot of very good information around scaling up your business. So it's going to be very helpful for you. And also make sure that you register for our Facebook channel, because we put a lot of information there too. So some of these things is what you should do. And I look forward to having you as part of our Federal Business Accelerator program. I look forward to having a very successful consulting business. And of course, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know what you're thinking and how you're working and how you're getting into the federal marketplace. You can get onto LinkedIn, search for my name, Nitin Pradhan, and actually get in and connect with me. And I look forward to these discussions, and I wish you all the best.